Welcome to the first episode of the first full series of The Timeline, where we look at a series, franchise, a patch of creative work, and we try and take it and put it into a realistic timeline of events alongside everything else in existence. So for our first pilot series, for those of you who listened may remember, we looked at Blade.
The infamous Blade.
The infamous, that's what we'll call him from now on, the infamous Blade. And that was an alright series, wasn't it? We had fun making that. But for the full series, we're going to have to go in with something a bit bigger and a bit longer. So we've, after much deliberation, how much deliberation do you think it was? A fair amount.
Fair amount. We're going with the infamous X-Men.
Does everything have to have a precursor?
Yes.
So as you've definitely underlined there, the infamous X-Men series is our
movie series.
Series. Yes. No, we're not going to look at every single comic book that's ever been released or the cartoons. So the idea is we're going to look through all of the X-Men films in order of release, with some possible exceptions, and kind of pop them in place, talk about them, look at the history around them as well a little bit. So, as makes sense, we'll be starting today with the original first X-Men.
What?
Sort of.
Yeah, released in 2000.
Yes.
Now I feel old for saying that. Because I remember that film first coming out.
Yeah, it's weird being that we're starting to really talk about. Obviously, you had a bit of it with Blade, but series where the nostalgia is really properly there now, because Blade was known, but X-Men was much bigger, wasn't it? And it's interesting to see, the effect it also had on culture and the acceptance of comic book and superhero specifically. It's like it is and it isn't a superhero movie, but in the traditional sense, Spider-Man's more the key one.
Yeah.
But X-Men is there. Like for a long time, X-Men. Ooh, the window's going crazy. 1 second.
Storm's outside.
For a long time, X-Men 2 was considered like up there as the best sort of comic book movie, like of the superheroes ilk. And then you look at Spider-Man 2, X-Men 2, and it's like Spider-Man 2 was overall both more comic booky but less kind of goofy at the same time. It's weird. I think that Sam Raimi being the director for that helps, because he's got a more unique sort of voice when it comes to shot choices and pacing and things like that. But we're not talking about Spider-Man. So yeah, the X-Men films had quite, and continue to an extent to have quite an impact on comic book movies. So it felt like X-Men was going to be long enough to make a good series, but also kind of interesting and have a few things going on, but be relatively light and breezy. And then I remembered it's the X-Men, and that comes with a few things of its own. So we're gonna have a look at it. You remember exactly what it was like before we get into it? When you saw the X-Men the first time. How long ago was that for you? Was it on release or?
I watched it on. I didn't watch it in the cinema definitely, but I definitely watched it on release, because I remember having the X-Men, and I used to watch it all the time. And then one of the kids, I used to like the Storm part we get to eventually. She says something about Toad, but then when I watched it again, I was like, wait, this is not cool anymore. But hey, then I remember watching X-Men 1.5 a lot as well. Because I don't think I watched this time, because it's like all extended.
Yes, so that's an important thing to note. We'll note that in a minute, really. But the version I'm going from for the basic outline for the show is the PAL DVD general release cut. So as we've noticed in the past, I looked at for a different thing, Alien vs Predator, and that first Alien vs Predator film in the UK was a different film than it was in America. So you can find that scenes may be missing, things are cut differently. So take that into account is all I'm saying. Linbert here, he's watched 1.5 recently.
I think I watched the one you watched recently.
Okay, we may see some discrepancy.
If we see some differences, that's because
if you expect a scene to be in there and I don't mention it,
that's because
one, it's because I was quite lazy with this one's research because I was short on time, but also because it just might not be in my version. So we'll get to that. Right. So as mentioned, we're talking about the X-Men, so we should probably look at the general cast and crew for this. So. We'll get to some of the things around these people as well in more depth at some point. Especially during the series, we won't not talk about many of the actors and characters in this episode because we will have more in-depth things to talk about them in other episodes. We've got a lot of work to go through. People often remember, and to an extent rightly so, the first film as Wolverine, Logan being the central character, but he was just partly because of the cartoon, partly because of his popularity in the comics, the most popular character, the most well recognised character, but he's not the central linchpin of the story as he seems like he is. There are a couple of scenes that kind of feed into that, but we'll get to that as well. So this first film is the first one directed by Bryan Singer, or Bryan J. Singer, born September 17th, 1965. American director, producer and writer of film and television. He's the founder of Bad Harry Productions and has produced or co-produced almost all of the films in the series. He's like producer on, I think, the whole franchise.
Really?
The screenplay, David Hayter of Solid Snake, fame. He is credited in some places as a screenwriter, but he did not write the script. He came in. Other people say that he came in and just did sort of some of the work on it to help out because he was an assistant to Bryan Singer at the time.
No.
But there are people saying he says he had about 55% of his work in the script.
Oh.
Other people say he barely touched it. So you just take it with a pinch of salt. It wouldn't surprise me because he has quite a bit of credit on the second film, and people are like in the movie industry. But David Bryan Hayter was born February 6th, 1969. He's a Canadian-American actor, voice actor, screenwriter, director, and producer. He's well known as the English language voice actor for Solid Snake and Naked Snake in the Metal Gear video game series. He also co-wrote Watchmen, the film, and was awarded the Saturn Award for Best Writing in 2000 for his work on X-Men.
Oh.
So he did get awarded for it. For the main cast, we have as Professor Charles Xavier, or Professor X, Sir Patrick Stewart, OBE, born 13th of July 1940. He's obviously an English actor, director and producer whose work has included roles on stage, television and film in a career spanning 6 decades. He has been nominated for Olivier Award, Golden Globe, Emmy, the Enemy Award, Screen Actors Guild and Saturn Awards. Beginning his career with a long run with the Royal Shakespeare Company, Stewart received the 1979 Laurence Olivier Award for Best Actor in Supporting Role for his performance in Anthony and Cleopatra in the West End. Stewart's first major screen roles were in the BBC broadcast television productions during the mid-1970s, including Hedda and the I, Claudius miniseries. From 1980s onwards, Stewart began working in American television and film with prominent leading roles such as Captain Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation and its subsequent films, and in 2020 Star Trek Picard, obviously, as Professor Charles Xavier, obviously, and he's been a number of other things like voice work in American Dad, and he narrates the Ted movie. A few other things. In 1993, he was named Best Dramatic Actor on Television of the 80s. He received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on 16th of December 1996. And he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II for services to drama in 2010. I think we can skip the bulk of it, but he's also, have seen him as Vladimir Lenin in Fall of Eagles. Obviously we mentioned I, Claudius. He was Carla in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Smiley's People, the TV series. Never watched them. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the film, is quite worth time. I've never sat down and watched the series either. Them books and stories are, well regarded. And we'll skip that, but he's also been in,
countless.
He was in Excalibur in 1981. He was in David Lynch's Dune, quite famously, in 1984. He was in Toby Hooper's Life Force in 1985. He's done more things since, but we're kind of focusing more on the pre-X-Men period because we can talk about anything post-X-Men once we'll tend to talk about them after they've left the series if we want to cover what they've done since. As Eric Lansher, depends on how people pronounce it, or Magneto, Sir Ian Murray McKellen, CHCBE. He's got them all. He's got the full set. He was born in 25th of May 1939. He's an English actor. His career spans genres ranging from Shakespearean to modern theatre to popular fantasy and science fiction, obviously. He's a recipient of 6 Laurence Olivier Awards, a Tony Award, a Golden Globe Award, a Screen Actors Guild Award, a BIF Award, 2 Saturn Awards, 4 Drama Desk Awards, and 2 Critics' Choice Awards. He also received nominations for 2 Academy Awards, 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, and 4 BAFTAs.
He's got it all. Yeah. He's done it all.
He was famous for film roles like King Richard III in Richard III in 1995. He was in Gods and Monsters in 1998, Magneto in the X-Men films. You might know him from a fantasy film series about some sort of ring.
You shall not pass.
You cannot pass through my ring, whatever it is. He started his professional career in 1961 at the Belgrade Theatre as a member of the highly regarded repertory company. He was knighted in 1991 in New Year's Honours for services to the performing arts. He's been openly gay since 1988 and continues to be a champion for LGBT social movements worldwide. Other supporting roles and interesting stuff. He was in 6 Degrees of Separation in 1993. He was also in the film Last Action Hero as the voice of death.
Oh.
So, yeah, there you go. A little fact for you. But yes, a lot of stuff done by those 2 gentlemen. And I was literally skimming over a lot of stuff there because there's just too much to take in.
You feel like maybe seeing them in the movies nowadays, you'd be like, what? These people are like massive. But back then they were kind of still relatively new. Like, but they're not young, but they're not as big as they wrote.
It's American sort of perception and actual workload are 2 different things, right? So once something gets mainstream, it's like, him from that one thing. Yeah. As Logan, or Wolverine, Hugh Michael Jackman was born 12th of October 1968. He's an Australian actor, singer and producer. He's best known for playing Wolverine or Logan in the X-Men film series, a role for which he holds the Guinness World Record for longest career as a live-action Marvel superhero. Which is weird. He's recognised for these roles in romantic comedy Kate and Leopard. He was the main character of Van Helsing in Van Helsing. He was in The Prestige in 2006 and so forth. Obviously, this is going a bit far past our timeline, so we won't go into too much detail, but he's done a few things since. As Dr. Jean Grey, codename Jean Grey, Famke, I'm going to get her name so wrong because it's Dutch. Famke Janssen, or Famke Boomer Janssen, not Boomer, Beumer. So I won't hazard getting that wrong to insulting people. She was noted for, aside from being a model at some point, I think, if I remember rightly, fashion model. She also played Xena Ontrop in Goldeneye in 1995.
Yeah, what's that film?
Oh, I get it. Xena Ontrop. She's on. Lol. As Aurora Monroe, or Storm, Halle Maria Berry
Legendary actor.
was born August 14th, 1966. Legendary for reasons that she probably doesn't want to be legendary for. She's done some good work. Let's not knock her. But
I actually quite like. I'm being serious. I actually quite like her.
Yeah. She's also done some stuff that is an American actress. She began her career as a model and entered several beauty contests, finishing as the first runner-up in the Miss USA pageant and coming in 6th in the Miss World pageant 1986. Her breakthrough film role was in the romantic comedy Boomerang in 1992, but she was also in The Flintstones in 94 and Bulworth in 98.
I remember watching The Flintstones, but I know what.
Shortly after being in this film, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in the romantic drama film Monsters Ball.
I think I've seen that, maybe.
Right, there's a lot. You skim through this cast, and on the whole, they're all top tier, proper like actors, you know.
Or they come into their...
And it's fascinating because you see some of the people who were up for roles in this as well, turned it down, who were up for these roles already, and you're like, they wouldn't be appropriate, or they're like even more, how would they think they were going to get them, you know. As Rogue, or Marie, I think she's called, if I remember rightly, Anna Helene Paquin. It's written down here. Born 24th July. I do have now, like, the phonetic sort of writing, and it's still not helping. Anyway, she's born 24th July 1982 and is a New Zealand Canadian actress. She was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and brought up in Wellington, New Zealand, before moving to Los Angeles during her youth.
Like a triangle, she's on.
As a child, she played the role of Flora McGrath in Jane Campian's romantic drama film The Piano in 1993. Despite having had little acting experience, for her performance she garnered critical acclaim and won Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress at the age of 11, making her the second youngest winner in Oscar history. You see what I mean? Actors. She had roles in Fly Away Home, that one with all the ducks or swans or whatever it is.
Never seen it.
Yeah, you'd have loved it when you were younger. The Member of the Wedding and A Walk on the Moon in 1999, and was nominated for the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Cast in a Motion Picture for appearing in Cameron Crowe's comedy drama film Almost Famous in 2000, the same year as X-Men.
Never seen that either.
You should try and see that. People rave about it. As Scott Summers, Cyclops. James Paul Marsden, born September 18th, 1973, is an American actor, singer and former model. Marsden began his acting career guest starring in television shows Saved by the Bell, The New Class.
I've seen Saved by the Bell.
The New Class, though.
Oh, wow.
Nobody saw that one.
Maybe.
Touched by an Angel in 1995 and Party of Five in 1995 as well.
Ain't seen any of those two.
Party of Five was pretty big. Touched by an Angel was everywhere, but you'd have to be a certain type of person to watch that show, I think. If you hadn't guessed, it's about angels.
I could guess.
It's not just a
touched by an angel.
It's not just a title. It's literally about angels. He gained prominence in the early 2000s with his portrayal of Scott Summers in the X-Men series. So, this is his sort of launching pad, really. He'd done stuff before, but he's all right. As Mystique, Rebecca Elay Romaine. She's Dutch, so again, sometimes you just don't know where somebody's name is from. But, you wouldn't know she was Dutch from her accent.
No.
Born November 6th, 1972, is an American actress and former model.
A lot of these former models, aren't
This is obviously, again, we're trying to stick to just what's before the film, so forgive me if I've left anything out. As Sabretooth, Dowell Carolat, I hope I've got that right, Dowell, because you're quite big. Born on December 8th, 1966, is a Canadian character actor and retired professional wrestler, better known by the name Tyler Mane.
Tyler Mane?
Tyler Mane, it's like at the back of your head, but you're not quite sure.
No, I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have to Google him after this.
Linbert's the more wrestling guy than I am. Like, I watch a lot of it, but you kind of... I'm shaking the desk there.
I'm going to Google him after.
He's a very big man, so it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense. He, because he's not going to be in the films again. Spoilers. he doesn't play the character again. He's in Rob Zombie's Halloween remakes, the first and second one, as The Shape or Michael Myers. So he's the big...
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. That makes sense. And he's done a few other bits and pieces since this.
I feel like they kind of butchered his characters in this film. We'll get onto it later.
Yeah.
Sabretooth wasn't a cool character in his X-Men film.
Yeah, the villains in this film are more classical comic book cartoony villains, which is the one element that kind of feels out of place, I think. The most out of place. After this, he would also go on to play Ajax in Troy, as well as the Michael Myers sort of role. As Senator Robert Kelly is Bruce Davidson, born June 28th, 1946. He's an American actor and director of television, film, and theatre. Yeah. He's actually much younger looking than Patrick Stewart, but he's only a few years younger.
Well, I like to see them both now. I bet Patrick
Stewart doesn't look that different, like you said earlier when we were talking about him. He's aged. He doesn't look too bad for all his age because of his look.
Yeah.
Davidson is well known for a starring role as William Stiles in the cult horror film Willard, which was remade a few years ago. But he the Willard film is about a guy who has a mess of rats.
No.
Yeah. Anyway.
Don't do horror, but
yeah, you should watch them films. All right. The Academy Award nominated and Golden Globe winning performance in Longtime Companion, and as Thomas Semmes in the HBO original movie Vendetta. And lastly, we get to Toad. Raymond Ray Park, born 23rd of August 1974, is a Scottish actor, author and martial artist.
Oh.
Even though you hear a sort of almost London accent.
Yeah.
He's best known for playing the body of Darth Maul in Star Wars Episode 1 of The Phantom Menace.
The body?
Yeah, he's definitely not the voice. That's Peter Serafinowicz, same famously, the comedian. Shaun of the Dead. Yeah. Sometimes I can't tell. It's like you're sitting there looking at me like, does he remember?
I've seen Shaun of the Dead once, but yeah, I know who it is.
Yeah. He's everywhere, but he's Peter Serafinowicz. But he's not in this film, so we're not going to talk about him. So the key notable side characters, actors, the first appearance of Sean Ashmore as Bobby Drake or Iceman. Oh. So he's not like a key character, but he's got this role for life, more or less.
No one likes Iceman either, so...
Iceman is hit and miss. Sean Robert Ash is more interesting than the Cyclops, and people really like Cyclops in some cases.
I hate Cyclops.
No,
Spoiler alert,
we'll get into this. Anyway, Sean Robert Ashmore, born October 7th, 1979, is a Canadian film and television actor. and we will talk about him more when his time comes. The other ones to mention is Katrina Florence is the first actress in the series to play Jubilation Lee, or Jubilee. Actor 1 of 1, so Jubilee tally is at 1 in the series so far. It will go up. There's also a note that we have Alex Burton as John Allardyce, or Pyro, which would be easier. He's not important in this film, but he's worth mentioning because the character does come back and is recast in the next film. And our first official Stan Lee spotting takes place.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a Stan Lee tally of 1 in this film. This is going to be a long, big tally by the time we get to the end of the eventual last Stan Lee cameo. We will go into the correct and appropriate detail for Mr. Stan Lee when the right time comes. We will not be talking about him here because he's also got enough of back history to take a while. So
what was his first film that was in the cameo in? Was it Spider-Man? Was it?
He was definitely in the first Spider-Man,
Yeah.
but if you start counting all sorts of stuff,
I mean, as in like I guess
you
the proper Marvel universe movie.
A Marvel movie would be probably the first Spider-Man, right?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna guess I
think. Or was it X-Men before Spider-Man? Because I can't remember. Anyway, we'll know for sure. I wasn't looking up Spider-Man, so I can't guarantee you. But obviously, he used to host like the cartoons.
Yeah, I don't mean. I mean,
and he used to pop up in other things.
I mean, as in like proper Marvel.
He was the voice of like Stan Lee in video games and stuff. Like that first Spider-Man video game, he's narrator as Stan Lee.
I guess in the first cameo, probably the 2000 around this, either this or Spider-Man.
And in this, he's not Stan Lee, right? But in Mallrats by Kevin Smith, he's playing Stan Lee. Does that count as the first cameo in a film or not? Because he comes back again as Stan Lee in one of the Marvel films, playing Stan Lee reading the script to Mallrats. It's all very confusing. This is going to get confusing. When I finally put up a proper timeline on a website somewhere, that's going to make us go mad. Anyway, notable characters. So the real key characters, there's say 4 that are important here. Because it's an ensemble cast. We'll be here all day. The first one is Professor X. In the comics, creators Stan Lee, previously mentioned, and Jack Kirby. His first appearance was X-Men #1, September 1963. Unless somebody can correct us on any of this, please do. AKA Charles Xavier. His other aliases over the years have been Prisoner M13, Onslaught, Chuck, Charlie, The Good Shepherd, Bald Phoenix, Dr. X, Proud Taskmaster, X, Charlie Boy, Cue Ball, Nathaniel Essex, Sinister, and I can't pronounce that last one. Ashula. Charles Francis Xavier was the mutant son of a wealthy nuclear researcher, Dr. Bryan Xavier, and his wife Sharon Xavier Marco. Charles' telepathic powers began emerging when he was still a boy, around 10, and as he grew older, he learned to control them. Due to the immense psychic energies emanating from Charles's head, he became bald at a young age. So, canonically, in the comics, he's bald because he's got psychic powers.
That makes sense.
To an extent.
Right.
It's interesting. Second key character is Magneto. In the comics, his creators are, again, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby. His first appearance was, again, X-Men #1, September 1963. So it's interesting to see that both characters are as old as each other. He's got other aliases. AKA, his name is Max Eisenhardt, because he's German, I think. We'll probably get to that in a minute. Other aliases: Magnus, Eric Magnus Lesher, Master of Magnetism, Auschwitz ID 24005. Retcon from 214782. So he's probably been down in different versions of the universe with different numbers branded on him. Michael Xavier, the Creator, Eric the Red, or Red, Grey King, White Pilgrim, King Eric Magnus, Eric Lashur, Mr. Sullivan, Miraculous Magneto, Phantom Saboteur, the Leader, Master, and Merciless Magneto.
Merciless Magneto.
Just things people have called him over the years. Max was born and raised in Nuremberg, Germany. I knew I'd gotten that from somewhere. By a middle-class Jewish family. While attending a local school, he became attracted to a young Romani girl, named Magda, the daughter of a school cleaner. Max would do things such as create necklaces and excel in sporting events to gain her attention. While returning from school one day, Max encountered a Nazi rally and found his Uncle Eric beaten and wearing the sign saying he had shamed a German woman as he was Jewish and she was not. Not long after a school event, Max won a javelin competition to impress Magda. And the following day he was accused of cheating, following the belief that a Jewish boy could not exceed his classmates. Max was told to either give up his medal or recreate the throw with a regulation javelin. After winning the competition a second time, Max was again accused of cheating, expelled, and beaten by the other children. He lived in a Jewish section of Warsaw where Nazis built the Warsaw Ghetto in October 1940. His time in the ghetto moulded Max into a smuggler of food and supplies. When the Nazis started to deport ghetto inhabitants to Treblinka extermination camp in 1942, Max and his family escaped from Warsaw. On the way to their hideout, they were captured by Nazi soldiers. As they were about to be executed, Jacob saved Max's life by pushing him out of the firing line without anyone noticing. The corpse and Max were buried in a mass grave. After being found, Max spent his early teens imprisoned at the, I'm not going to say it properly, but Versengungs extermination camp. Please forgive me for getting that wrong. In Auschwitz, Poland. The only member of his family to survive the Holocaust, Max was unable to access his mutant powers at puberty, like most, due to a bout of hepatitis from working in the camp. Most likely. This is me grabbing this from different places, but that's what's surmised as his early years. Obviously, we know generally what he does next. You know, there's too much history for Magneto and Xavier to go in too much depth, but it gives you an idea of their background. Senator Kelly, or Robert Kelly in the comics. Sorry, I'm burping there.
Another comic.
The creators, Chris Claremont and John Byrne. His first appearance was in X-Men 133 in May 1980. He dies in X-Men Volume 2, 108 in January 2001. He's a Republican senator for the state of Massachusetts. As a member of the US Senate, Robert Kelly long regarded the growing number of mutants as a threat to national security. He cultivated a partnership with industrialist Sebastian Shaw, who supported Kelly's plans. Unbeknown to the senator, though, Shaw was a mutant and the Black King of the Hellfire Club. All these things are obviously going to come up later in the films to an extent. Kelly was invited to a party at the club, and Mastermind created an illusion that caused him to believe Cyclops fired randomly into a crowd. Yeah. To cope with this supposed danger, he promoted legalization such as the Mutant Registration Act. Say that when you're not useless. Requiring those with powers of genetic origin to disclose their abilities to the government. This proposal prompted the Second Brotherhood of Mutants to attempt to assassinate Kelly in Washington, D.C. The death of Kelly led to a dystopian future in which Sentinels conquered the planet, otherwise known as Days of Future Past.
Great little thing that was.
Yeah.
In a cartoon anyway.
Well, the comic is like, people will think it's quite a big storyline, and you know, effect-wise it is, but in the comics it's like 2 episodes or 2 issues, and that's it. I think 2, maybe 3. I've never read it as the original comics because they're not that easy to come by. Our last key character is Rogue. Creators Chris Claremont and Michael Golden. Her first appearance is in Avengers Annual... I can speak properly. In Avengers Annual 10 in October 1981. A.k.a. Anne-Marie. Her other aliases have been Anna Raven, Anna Marie, Carol Danvers, Dr. Kellogg, Mutate 9602, Scarlett O'Hara, Skunkhead, and Miss Smith. Again, don't come at me if I've gotten any of those out of a bin somewhere. Her powers are to absorb life energy in the psyche of others with skin-to-skin contact. So her notable comic beats, and this is the important and interesting one, as Rogue was approached by Mystique when quite young, who sought her out on the advice of her progenitive partner, Destiny. Mystique ultimately took Rogue in as a daughter. In time, Mystique turned Rogue's loneliness, envy, bitterness and despair into anger, thus recruiting her into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, as they were known. That evil part's dropped for the films. In her first mission, Rogue encountered the superheroine Miss Marvel. Rogue and Miss Marvel fought, and through prolonged contact, during which Miss Marvel fought valiantly to retain her consciousness, Rogue absorbed Miss Marvel's alien-based powers and memories permanently. Rogue gained Miss Marvel's incredible strength, near invulnerability, the power of flight, and a rarely used mild form of ESP referred to as Seventh Sense, although this last ability has been largely forgotten. So, in future, should Marvel pick up the characters and use them relatively soon, there is potential there for something to happen between Rogue and Miss Marvel, or Carol Danvers, especially because Rogue takes the name at some point. Mainly because she has her mind in her head, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, you would.
So that's the key 4 characters, I think. Like, you'd think we'd throw Wolverine in there, but in the future, he gets his own films.
Yeah.
So we have more than enough time to talk about Wolverine. Any thoughts before we dive into the development history?
No.
Okay.
No thoughts at all.
All right, so the X-Men film history. So it was directed. This is going to get heavy. Okay. Directed by Bryan J. Singer. X-Men was his 4th big screen effort, coming off the wildly successful The Usual Suspects in '95. You seen The Usual Suspects?
Maybe, but I don't remember. I may have seen it, but
I always intended to watch it at some point. People always rave about that film, but it's difficult to go and watch it psychologically. Kind of like with you were talking about Mulan earlier. Yeah, same sort of principle. And the smaller scale adaptation of Stephen King's Apt Pupil, which I have seen, and was an interesting film and story. It revolves around Ian McKellen playing a former Nazi who's on the run, like many Nazi members are. And there's an interesting relationship between him and this very intelligent young man who figures out who he is and sort of blackmails him so that he can learn about his history. It's an interesting film. I've only seen it the once, though. So I mulled over at what point I should talk about Singer, because he's around for a while, but I figure it's important to look at his legacy, but also everything around him. And I want to do my due diligence now. So there's some challenging, difficult topics to be discussed, and it's better to do the work ahead of time. So should anybody listening have any corrections or any details as emerge as we cover the films, please be aware that there may be updates later. I also want to give a warning now that we will be discussing briefly topics of potentially disturbing sexual nature. If you feel you may be uncomfortable with this, feel free to skip forward to 15 minutes or give this episode a skip, and we will totally understand.
Yeah.
With that said, we need to cover the details surrounding Singer. So this will be brief, but we'll do it by year, up to what we know today. So in 1997, a 14-year-old extra accused Singer of asking him and other minors to film a shower scene in the nude for apt pupil. 2 other adolescent boys, 16 and 17 years old, later supported the 14-year-old's claim. The boys claimed trauma from the experience and filed a civil suit against filmmakers alleging infliction of emotional distress, negligence and invasion of privacy, and alleged that they were filmed for sexual gratification. While some sources state that the civil case was dismissed due to insufficient evidence, others indicate that it was settled out of court and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office declined to press criminal charges. In 2014, April 2014, Singer was accused in a civil lawsuit of sexual assault of a minor. According to the suit filed by attorney Jeff Herman, Singer was alleged to have drugged and raped actor and model Michael Egan in Hawaii after meeting him at parties hosted by convicted sex offender Mark Collins-Rector. In the late 1990s, Singer's attorney called the allegations completely fabricated, and Singer planned to countersue. Singer denied the allegations in a statement, calling them outrageous, vicious, and completely false. On May 22nd, 2014, Singer's attorney presented evidence to the federal district judge Susan Oki Mulloway, sorry if I get that name wrong, stating that neither Singer nor Egan were in Hawaii at the time. In early August 2014, Egan sought to withdraw his lawsuit via request from court order of dismissal and asked that it be granted without prejudice or an award of costs or fees in the interest of justice. In May 2014, another lawsuit was filed by attorney Jeff Herman on behalf of an anonymous British man. Both Singer and producer Gary Goddard, who was named separately in the first case, were accused of sexually assaulting John Doe number 117. According to the lawsuit, Goddard and Singer met the man for sex while he was a minor and engaged in acts of gender violence against him while in London for the premiere of Superman Returns. The charge against Singer in this case was dismissed at the accuser's request in July 2014. Singer was cited in the 2014 documentary film on child sexual abuse in Hollywood, An Open Secret, but details of Egan's allegations were omitted after Egan withdrew his lawsuit during the film's production. Author Bret Easton Ellis alleged that 2 of his former partners had attended underage sex parties hosted by Singer and fellow director Roland Emmerich. In 2017, on December 7th, 2017, Cesar Sanchez Gutzman, again, I must underline, I apologise for any names I get wrong, filed a lawsuit in Washington against Singer, alleging that he had been raped at the age of 17 by the director in 2003. Singer denied the allegations and removed himself from the public eye after the lawsuit was announced. The USC School of Cinematic Arts removed Singer's name from its Division of Cinema and Media Studies program, an action which had been previously requested by the students at the school. In 2019, in June 2019, well, we're going to cover a few different time periods, but as it's written here, in June 2019, Sanchez Gutzman's bankruptcy trustee Nancy James recommended that a $150,000 settlement be approved, citing the absence of evidence that Singer attended the yacht party where the alleged assault took place. Singer's attorney, Andrew Brettler, said the Singer had maintained his innocence and that the decision to resolve the matter with the bankruptcy trustee was purely a business one. Much of the settlement would go towards paying the creditors and the administrators of the case, which the remainder allocated to Sanchez Gutzman. On January 23rd, 2019, Alex Frenchman and Maximilian Potter published an investigative report in The Atlantic in which 4 more men alleged that Singer sexually assaulted them while they were underage. The article also claimed that Sanchez Gutzman's 2017 lawsuit was stalled when Singer's legal team reported Gutsman to the Internal Revenue Service and U.S. immigration officials, although this was disputed by one of Singer's lawyers. In response to the men's allegations, Singer denied any association with them and described the journalists as homophobic. In the wake of the renewed allegations, GLAAD withdrew Bohemian Rhapsody's nomination for the year's GLAAD Media Award in the Outstanding Film Wide Release category and stated Singer's response to the Atlantic story wrongfully used homophobia to deflect from sexual assault allegations. Time's Up released a statement on Twitter applauding the decision, stating, "The recent allegations regarding Bryan Singer's behaviour are horrifying and must be taken seriously and investigated." On February 6th, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts removed Singer's name from Bohemian Rhapsody's nomination for the BAFTA Award for Best British Film due to the allegations against him. On February 11th, Millennium Films stated that Red Sonja, a film that Singer had been attached to direct, was no longer on their slate of films, although the company's founder, Avi Lerner, had earlier defended hiring Singer despite the allegations. I've attached a link to this, a lot of this. There are links going to be in the description and other promotional parts for this episode, so people can read up properly and get the real details, and not see this as some sort of leaning one way or the other, whether he did or didn't do these things. But these things have been, yes, these things have been talked about, and should he have actually done these, this is quite obviously is hanging over him quite a lot, and it's understandable. People will want to distance themselves from certain elements of the series now. It's interesting because he's so tied up with it, and the allegories involved in because we're talking about the representation of the X-Men and mutants being an allegory for being gay and oppression and stuff, and he's obviously someone who's used the homophobia thing back there, and then at the same time the idea of maybe he did call immigration on someone to try and defend himself, so they'd be kicked out of America so he wouldn't get in trouble. Obviously we don't know what's happened and what hasn't. Believe those who've been hurt and the accusers, and find the truth and hopefully find justice. But it doesn't, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't look good for him, as somebody who's been accused, because his behaviour around it doesn't look like the actions of a completely innocent person, But we don't know, so we can't really say 100% either way. On top of this is slightly easier to get through. There's a couple of notable actors who have made comments about working with Singer in the intervening years that put him in less favourable light. One of which was Halle Berry. In an interview with Variety, Berry said, "Bryan's not the easiest dude to work with. I mean, everybody's heard the stories, but I don't have to repeat them. I heard of his challenges and what he struggles with. I would sometimes be very angry with him," Berry says. "I got into a few fights with him, said a few cuss words out of sheer frustration. When I work, I'm serious about that, and when it gets compromised, I get a little nutty. But at the same time, we have a lot of compassion for people who are struggling with whatever they're struggling with, and Bryan struggles. Sometimes because of whatever he's struggling with, he just didn't always feel present. He didn't feel there. We were outside in our little X-Men stage, freezing our ass off in Banff, Canada, with sub-zero weather, and he's not focusing, and we're freezing. You might get a little mad." And the other actor of note is Brandon Routh during Superman Returns. During an interview with Michael Rosenbaum for his Inside of You podcast, I think this was quite recent, Roth recalled, "Bryan is a film genius and was very passionate about the film, and I think we made a great movie. he wasn't always easy to work with. He believes Singer's actions are due to trauma. We're talking about mental health. Everyone should be seeing a therapist, he said. Everyone has trauma in their life, and when I say trauma, it just means heavy emotional experience. It doesn't mean you had traumatic brain injury or you were in the war. I recommend a trauma therapist. I see one. I always put on his best face when working with him. He had little things in his life that would come up, and he wasn't always the kindest person to everyone. Again, I've attached links to a lot of these stories where these quotes and bits are coming from. But it paints a picture of someone. Yeah, one of the stories I read implied that he vanished off a film set for one of the future films we're going to look at for 10 days straight in the middle of directing, and he just told everybody to just get on with it.
But you're the director.
Yeah. Thankfully, there's second unit directors and stuff like that, and producers get involved more in the studio. But right, that's all that's not all the bad stuff, but that's the bulk of the real world. No. Well, it's not the bulk of the real world. Okay, well, that's the bad stuff for now.
Okay.
Around the production, there is one other bit later, but there's some heavy stuff in the film as well. Oh, what have I let myself in for? How do you feel about watching the films? Like, how much of that did you hear about previously?
I actually knew nothing about that. So for me, like,
this
is all news
I could
to me.
see you out the corner of my eye, and I could see you kind of moving your head when you're hearing stuff, like looking around and taking it all in.
Yeah, I've not heard of any of that before.
Yeah, how does that reflect on you on the film since you've?
You see, it's hard though. I don't know because
you have to kind of separate.
Yeah, because I know the director plays a massive important part of the film, but also you got all the other actors, and actors and all of their support staff. So it's just like it's weird. I don't know.
It's interesting because his voice creatively is less tied to it than, like we were saying, Sam Raimi is. You can see his style and his voice in the directing of Spider-Man, especially Spider-Man 2. But knowing his history and his what they're saying is his personal struggles and the importance of X-Men, and that he's hired Ian McKellen, who's openly gay, and he agreed to be on the film. I think I remember reading during my short researches. He agreed to be on the film because he felt it was important as an analogy for homosexuality and the mistreatment of gay people by society and, equality and things like that. So you can see how this could have meant quite a lot to him. So how tied up in this series he is interesting. But yeah, it's I'd heard things about him before, but I didn't go into the depth about it. So it's interesting to know. And I didn't know how many of the films he directed. You'll be surprised how many of the future films he's actually involved in directing. But that's all right. So film release history. We'll get into a bit of the pre-production release. So as always, we know which universe it takes place in, and in this film, as far as I remember, this cinematic universe, when it comes to the Marvel universe, is canon, the multiverse. This takes place on Earth 10005. And the main Marvel Comics universe is Earth 616, as we know from the Blade films. We know that in the future the series splits.
Oh, yeah.
And you may be expecting it to split into two separate timelines, but as far as I can figure out, it splits into as many as maybe 4 or 5 different universe timelines. So again, I've bitten off a bit more than I could chew. Anyway,
it's going to get complicated.
It may get complicated. I'll try my best. So Marvel Comics writers and chief editors Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas wrote an X-Men screenplay in 1984 when Orion Pictures held the option for the film rights. But development stalled when Orion began facing financial troubles. So it's interesting because it's quite a long way back that there was something being optioned. In 93, Avi Everard, who was tied to, I think, the Blade films and all the other Marvel stuff to some extent. Yeah. If I remember rightly. It's been a while since we made them Blade episodes. Produced the X-Men TV series for Fox Kids. You know, the famous one with the theme.
I love it.
You may have seen a video I put online recently about that.
That was a good video as well.
20th Century Fox was impressed with the success of the TV show, and producer Lauren Schuler Donner purchased the film rights, for them in 1994. An early draft script involved Professor Xavier recruiting Wolverine into the X-Men, which consisted of Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. So the original X-Men, essentially. That was the first team of the X-Men, in case anybody doesn't know.
The OG X-Men.
The Brotherhood of Mutants, which consisted of Magneto, Sabretooth, Toad, Juggernaut, and the Blob, tried to conquer New York City, while Henry Peter Garrick and Bolivia Trask attacked the X-Men with 3 8-foot, 2.4 meter tall Sentinels. The script was focused on the rivalry between Wolverine and Cyclops, as well as the latter's self-doubt as a field leader. Part of the backstory involved from Magneto made him the cause of the Chernobyl disaster.
Oh, interesting.
Now, if they'd taken that one bit and put it in one of the films, maybe that'd be more interesting. But that film doesn't sound super good. And it seems like it's semi-focused on recreating the first few episodes of the cartoon while mixing in there was another cartoon that was failed, a really bad one, where there was Wolverine in it, but his accent was Australian. That gives you an idea.
I guess it's a prelude to the actual Wolverine.
Yeah, ironically. Fox considered Brett Ratner as director of the first film. Brett Ratner would go on to direct The Last Stand.
You know what? Oh, actually, no, he could actually, yeah.
Yeah. And offered the position to Robert Rodriguez, but he turned it down.
Oh.
After a commercial success of Mortal Kombat in the United States, Paul W.S. Anderson was offered the position, but thankfully turned it down. I imagine a world where Paul W.S. Anderson was responsible for the X-Men instead of doing all of the Resident Evil films that he did.
The Resident Evil films are weird though, because they're crap, but they're not crap at the same time. Like, I could sit there and watch them.
Define what you mean by that.
I don't know. They're like sort of like they're watchable, but they're not. I won't recommend anyone to watch them, but like, if someone put it in front of me, I'll sit there and watch it. Like,
no, they're watchable, but I wouldn't recommend anybody watches them.
They're like a guilty pleasure movie, I guess. Like the Underworld series, I guess.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, a series where the director directs every episode, and his wife is the lead actress in black leather outfits. Yeah. Anyway, but he wanted to shift away from making another PG-13 rated film in favour of making R-rated horror film Event Horizon.
That's quite a good film, though.
Yeah, his one like truly good film. Other interesting notes: Russell Crowe was Singer's first choice to play Wolverine.
Yeah.
But he turned it down, instead recommending his friend, actor Hugh Jackman, for the part.
Oh.
Hugh Jackman didn't get the part. Jackman was actually cast 3 weeks into filming.
Oh.
So they'd already filmed a load of the film before he was even part of the film, based on a successful audition. Fox Broadcasting Company aired a special entitled Mutant Watch to promote the movie. We watched that earlier. It's considered part of the in-world canon. And there was also a Marvel Comics prequel called X-Men Beginnings. We aren't going to look at that, but it looks at Magneto, Rogue, and Wolverine's origins to extent. And a console video game, X-Men Mutant Academy, was released in July 6th, 2000. It's not tied to the films, but it was released to kind of grab hold of the popularity of it. and ride on its coattails. We watched the Fox special earlier because it's on the DVD. What did you think of that? It's mostly just promotional materials for the film, right?
Yeah, it's just.
But it's the interesting wrapper. They tried to make it part of the universe, part of the canon.
It does work because it does build. It does. It sort of builds the world. Like if you don't know anything about X-Men, you watch that, you think, oh, this is like.
It's the sort of stuff they used to put on MTV back in the day, where they just promote a film and have like the cast interviews and then clips from the film and stuff.
It gives you like a look into the world of
the
X-Men and what they're going to struggle.
I mean, ultimately, the cartoon's what sold people on the film. But
if you've never seen the cartoons, you're like, oh, what's this X-Men all about? You're like, oh.
Well, the kids want to go see this film. I'll watch it. And it's interesting because at the end he's giving this interview outside of this hearing, and his daughter's there, revealing she's a mutant somehow. And it's the worst visual effects you've ever seen.
But it'd be more interesting actually into that bit more in the film. If
it was official.
Yeah.
So we don't know her name, but she's like stretchy mutant or something. Like, you still love me, don't you?
Mrs. Fantastic.
Yeah, Mrs. Mediocre. But yeah, it was interesting that they did something like pre-film. It doesn't have a date or anything in the timeline. Probably if I look at it again, there'll be something in the credits that dates it. But we're going to assume it took place before the film. So before the film starts, Senator Robert Kelly holds a hearing, or attends a hearing, with several, judges, Supreme Court, I assume.
Yeah. And
they debate, the dangers of mutants and what he wants to do, the registration program, stuff like that. And then his daughter reveals herself to be a mutant at the end. Nothing too heavy. It's just a bit goofy. If you've got the DVD, give it a watch. It's worth a laugh.
It might be on YouTube, I guess, somewhere.
It's probably on YouTube, yeah. So, are we ready for the actual film?
Yes.
This should be relatively short, actually, because I was lazy and didn't do much.
Not much really happened. Stuff happens, but it's not like...
a lot happens, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, we're not trying to knock... If you really liked this film back in the day, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. But a lot doesn't happen in this film. It's one of the shoddier Marvel property films.
Even from effects, it's nothing...
It's all right.
It's all right, but you don't really see... It's no, grand battle.
It all gets better.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Sometimes it's all right to have smaller battles.
And plus, we've got to think in 2000s, it probably made it harder, whereas now all the effects are like...
They had a relatively modest budget back then. And, like I say, you see so many massive fights in comic films now. It's nice to have something smaller scale, but with relatively big stakes. And it's more believable to an extent. Like, instead of being an all-powerful nightmare man who can kill everybody in one go, like, if you're limited as a villain, you'd attack the small, most important group of people you can and change the world in one go that way instead of, grand scale stuff. So that makes some of it more interesting. And there are things around it, the wrapper and the what it's saying about the world and stuff that's interesting, especially reflecting on some of the stuff we see happening nowadays. Anyway, let's get to the film. Ready? Ready. We open on 20th Century Fox logo, then darkness, before a voiceover tells us about mutation and its key place in the evolution of life on Earth. Every few hundred years, evolution leaps forward. Special effects, blurry blue stuff, computers. And then we should probably mention Darwin's theory of evolution. In biology, evolution is the change of characteristics in a species over several generations and relies on the process of natural selection. The theory of evolution is based on the idea that all species are related and gradually change over time. Mutation, spontaneous mutations, are the results of errors in natural biological processes. If those mutations mean that you can survive for longer, then your children carry those mutations. Mutations in Marvel Comics mutants, everybody has a different mutation. So I'm not sure if it's truly evolution.
No,
Instead, something's affecting all of them and making them change. In the comics, the Inhumans and the mutants are both exist in the same universe, obviously, and they have a sort of aggressive relationship between those two groups, but essentially the same thing. The Inhumans are changed by an event that's brought on deliberately, and mutants kind of just happen to have it happen.
Born that way.
It's worth noting that if a natural mutant is put through the thing that changes Inhumans into Inhumans, Terrigenesis, I think it's called, the mutant will be killed by it.
Oh, that makes... I guess that...
So it means that there's something where they're both at odds in a genetic sense as well. But we don't want to talk about the Inhumans right now. Like, for a while in the Marvel TV series, in the cinematic universe, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. most notably, the Inhumans were used as stand-ins for the mutants, and therefore some of the storylines revolved around people fearing and hating them.
No.
If you've not seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we may get around to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the long term. We've got too much to go through when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Anyway, I've linked to Spontaneous Mutations page just for people if they want to look at it to see what I mean, what I'm reading. We come to our opening. After some cool computer graphics and a title card, the future door, or like a round future door, closes and seems to lock. So the door closes and locks, and then we go through the door with it closed as our visual lead to the next scene. Why not just do it as the door opening and going through to the next scene? No, as a metaphor and a transition, it seems like it's been done wrong. Anyway, rain patters hard on a muddy ground. People walk through in the wet and the rain. A subtitle tells us it's Poland in 1944. Just when I think we're going to have an easy and fun series, the films to talk about, I forget the whole hard historical and political social commentary edge at every aspect the X-Men has. So, here's the other big hard thing to talk about. I'm going to keep this brief though, because I don't want to go into this for too long. 1944, day and month unknown in the film. Poland, 1944. This is probably Auschwitz, or a place much like it that existed in this universe's world. I know you're likely to know what Auschwitz is, but for those who are too young or uninformed, the Auschwitz concentration camp was a complex of 40 concentration and extermination camps operated by Nazi Germany in occupied Poland during World War II. And it was used as a means to facilitate what is known as the Holocaust. Yeah. It consisted of Auschwitz I, the main camp. Forgive me for any words, again, that I get wrong. Auschwitz, Auschwitz II, Birkenau, a concentration and extermination camp built with several gas chambers. Auschwitz III, Monowitz, a labour camp created to staff a factory for the chemical conglomerate IG Farben, and dozens of sub-camps. The camps became a major site of what Nazis referred to as the final solution. Or was written in some places as the final solution to what they called the Jewish problem. This is just really uncomfortable to talk about. Germany sparked World War II by invading Poland in September 1939. Obviously, if you don't know all this, you know. The Schutzstaffel, or SS, converted Auschwitz I, an army barracks, into a prison of war camp for Polish political prisoners. The first inmates, German criminals, brought to the camp in May 1940 as functionaries, established the camp's reputation for sadism, where prisoners were beaten, tortured, and executed for the most trivial reasons. The first gassings of Soviet and Polish prisoners took place in Block 11 of Auschwitz I around August 1941. The construction of Auschwitz II began the following month, and from 1942 to late 1944, freight trains delivered Jews from all over German-occupied Europe to its gas chambers. Of the 1.3 million people sent to Auschwitz, 1.1 million died. The death toll includes 960,000 Jews, 865,000 of whom were gassed on arrival, 74,000 non-Jewish Poles, 21,000 Roma, 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war, and up to 15,000 other Europeans. Those not gassed died of starvation, exhaustion, disease, individual executions, or beatings. Others were killed during medical experiments. There's going to be a link to information about Auschwitz for those who want to read in more detail. Obviously, I'm not an expert in World War II or the Holocaust, and I don't have any place to really talk about it in depth. But, and obviously the 1.1 million killed we're mentioning are only the specific deaths as I've read them around Auschwitz itself. Many, 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 many more people were murdered and killed as part of the Holocaust. So, yes, that's a bit of a heavy start to what is our fun mutant superhero comic series. But I figured, again, we are seeing it. It has to be mentioned. Get it out of the way now. Obviously, as a precursor to the narrative and events surrounding the story of the film, it's a firm reminder of the extremes that hatred of those that are different can lead humanity to. And striking, if possibly garish choice for the starting point in what really is our main protagonist and antagonist story. Now, when you look back at the film and the series to an extent, it's almost entirely about Magneto, Eric, and what he goes through. And obviously, this isn't quite the same story as the Eric from the comics, but it's quite close. So, it's if people weren't expecting Auschwitz to be the first thing they saw in this big comic book film, they might have felt a bit taken back by it, especially if they'd taken their kids and stuff. Anyway, I hope I did enough justice to that for our stupid show. We'll try and be lighter after the scene. We see a family, a mother, a father, and a young boy, being led into the camp with many others. They're separated violently. A young boy fights to get to his mother when his powers unintentionally manifest, holding him in place as he anchors to the metal of the camp's gates. Before being knocked down by a guard, we see the boy on his back afterwards, mud, rain falling, before we see those ahead of him slowly led towards a building with a tall chimney. And that's the last we're going to mention of quite that sort of stuff. We're still not done with the uncomfortable stuff, I'm sorry. How do you feel about that? Sorry.
It's weird though, because when I watched as a kid, I never understood it was about Auschwitz. Because obviously I lived in Greece for a while, so obviously I didn't really know I think they don't really talk about World War II at all there. So for me, it was just like this Magneto like finding his power, like being beaten down. But obviously I went to Auschwitz a couple of years ago. Then watching it again now, I'm like, oh.
How do you feel about having gone to Auschwitz? How was that?
I would recommend going, but obviously it's quite a sad thing to like.
Heavy.
I think especially when you see how they lived in like. And one of them had 4 chambers, like just because how it used to work like day and night apparently. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't want to go too much into detail about all the stuff, but the stories of when the soldiers finally liberated the camps, and there were, I think it was American soldiers, were attempting to feed these people who had been starved and suffered, and people had to tell them to stop because feeding them would kill them because they'd been without food.
Once the Nazis found out why they tried destroying Auschwitz too. That's why most of it's destroyed now. Because as soon as they found out Americans were coming, they tried hiding it.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, this is heavy shit, man. Not to be too flippant, but on to the fun stuff, or semi-fun stuff. Next, we jump forward to a sunny day in Mississippi, in the quote not too distant future, which is the most useful title I've ever seen. Like, thank you, film, for telling me exactly when I'm supposed to set this. So the film came out, I think it was
2000,
close to the end of 2000,
Yeah.
December, possibly. So the film, if it's released in 2000 and it's the future, but not too distant, but that still sounds like it's distant enough. This could be between 2000 and 2004, I guess, and that's the most I'm going to go to. Hopefully the second film will let us know, if this one doesn't, at some point, when the hell everything's going on. But the technology is not so far flung that it's impossible. Maybe the sort of X-Men stuff in the mansion, but even that's not too over the top. We find a young girl and a boy in a bedroom. A woman is downstairs practicing piano. A girl tells her companion about her supposed plan to journey from her home in Mississippi to Alaska for some reason. He asks her if it wouldn't be kind of cold. She says, otherwise it wouldn't be an adventure, stupid. I'm not sure she understands the word adventure. It's like, sure, okay. I could go anywhere on an adventure. I want to go somewhere really cold.
Alaska.
That's what I call an adventure. Sure. She says she's going to do it after high school, but before college, which puts her around the age of 14 to 18, which implies she's in high school. Most likely 16, 17.
But yeah, most.
Eventually the teens kiss, and suddenly all the veins pop out from under the boy's face, and screaming. So much screaming. Must have been a bad kiss. Yeah, can you recreate that for me? Smooch.
I felt the scream was a bit over the top there. I don't know.
Yeah, it was like stage screaming. It was so like obvious. But fair play. She was young still then. She's a good actress still. Her dad runs in and calls her Marie, so we've got a name. Cut to the next scene. We find ourselves at the United States Capitol, or the Capitol building. Again, date and time unknown. A woman is giving evidence at a hearing.
Yeah.
There's like the only image in the background is this big television monitor above her, and these slides are closing to cover it up. But it's just like a double helix and no information at all. So it's hilarious. She's talking about mutation. She is addressed by a single man in the room as Miss Grey. He is Senator Robert Kelly. We've seen him before if you've seen the extras, but this is the first time we see him in the film. Figures watch proceedings from balconies as the senator stands up and gives a massive speech and waves papers around. If this is a Senate hearing or something along those lines, is he allowed to do that? Can somebody tell me?
I actually have no idea.
None of the other senators speak up.
I've never watched the Senate here, so
It doesn't feel like it should be allowed. He turns it to his own little stage show, you know. It earns him applause from an audience of some kind. Anyway, an older man in a hat is spotted leaving by another man in a wheelchair. In the concourse in the back of the building, he calls out Eric. Before they discuss the morals of the situation, Charles, as he's referred to, fails to get through to him. They talk about, evolving into them as humanity and how they can be better, and obviously they're differing morals of the two characters, but we don't know a lot of details yet, and we don't know who these people are. We just know their names, so we can't associate any of them with anything we've seen before yet. It's interesting that the first two scenes are the origin stories of two characters, because one of them, it's really obvious why it's an origin story for him. For her, origin story from her now near past future. It isn't clear why she's given this origin story bit, but then later, even though you wouldn't think it to watch the film and remember it, because again you think Wolverine's the main character, she's essentially the protagonist. You're seeing it fall from her eyes, right? How do you feel about all this, like, as a beginning part and the two origins and the introductions of the two older gentlemen,
I quite like going back to it, because I guess at the time I didn't even... I knew the X-Men was, so I was like... I guess you'd be watching it from the point of view of not knowing at all. You might be a bit like, oh... But I guess Wolverine was never... I don't really like Wolverine that much as a kid.
Well, you don't even... I mean, at this point, we haven't even seen him yet, so it's interesting. Not even a hint that it's going to be in the film. But general scenes, going back to, let's say, Auschwitz, or standing for Auschwitz, and seeing their pasts. How do you think I think that his was better done than hers.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, hers is what happens in her comic book narrative, famously. But and I'm not sure specifics about if you see a scene similar to this. Obviously, we talked about the comic book history of the character earlier, but that scene of him holding on to the gates, that comes up again several times in the series, I think.
To me, I feel like this is more Magneto.
Yeah,
Film. This one, like,
it's almost like the whole series is Magneto's.
That's what it
series.
comes down. Yeah.
Despite being the antagonist, it's like the whole storyline is always about him.
Because he's kind of a weird character, because he is bad, but he's not bad at the same time. Because you can kind of see what he... Yeah,
again, well, that's that whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you kind of see what he wants to do, but obviously he goes about in a bad way of doing it. Like
he like the bad guy is always right, which is why they're interesting.
Yeah,
like they're doing the wrong thing, but their motivations are always really justified to an extent. Again, to an extent, like the actions aren't justified, but the motivations are understandable. Especially as he's seen the worst of humanity already.
Of course, that's what he.
Yeah. And as we'll find out, he consistently sees the worst of humanity. Anyway, so we've gone past the hearing. We cut to a new location. A semi-truck pulls into a scene, and our girl from earlier steps out of the passenger side. The card reads, Northern Alberta, Canada. No day or time is given, and because it's so far north, it may be any time of day or night, because of the sun thing. And we assume it's winter, so it could be like midday for all we know. She asks why the driver didn't give her a lift all the way to Loughlin City. He says he did. It appears that it's a city made of corrugated metal sheets or barns. I'd like to know the only Loughlin I could find that was actually in a Nirvana, of all places, which is almost the polar opposite of Canada, but still. Inside the barn or bar or fight pit, our teenage girl walks in and watches a pair of men fight in a cage made of fencing, like a cage fighting sort of MMA sort of cage.
Illegal cage fighting.
Yeah. A new fighter walks in to fight the winner. Attacking from behind, the bartendee gets a few fists in before the smaller man punches back, and both their fists meet with a strange clank noise.
Oh yeah.
Clang.
I feel like that would happen with his fists would get crushed.
Even if, like, ignoring all that, you shouldn't be able to hit. The other guy's not made of metal.
That's what I mean. So, like, the other guy's fist would literally collapse. Like,
yeah, but like, why is he making them sounds? He's covered in flesh. Like, there's no reason. Don't get me angry. Anyway, the smaller man punches back, and he punches twice more, and again, two weird metal on metal sound effects. Wolverine wins again. The Wolverine, as he's called, wins again. Sometime later, he joins our teen runaway at the bar. A news report on TV talks about Ellis Island and an upcoming summit with a large number of world leaders attending. The previous cage fighter arrives, walking up behind our new friend Wolverine, saying no man takes a beating like that without a mark to show for it. But as far as I remember, he got like 3 hits in at most. There was no beating. So the guy who lost also has a really big bruise across his face. So the guy who got the beating really did have marks left for it. But sure, whatever. He attempts to take a knife and attack with it, but with the young girl screaming out loud, Wolverine turns around and reveals he has claws in each hand, forearm, wrist. I mean, they're in the sort of forearm area and they come out of the wrist joint.
Yeah.
If he had his hand like that, they'd come out there. You can't see what I'm doing on the podcast, but I'm doing like my hand at a funny angle, and obviously they're not going to come out of his hand this way, downwards. They're just going to come out of the wrist joint, and then if he lifts his arm up, that's going to anyway. I'm sure there's a sort of genetic mechanical reason why it wouldn't come out any other way.
I don't think, no, because
like if he did that, they would come out there.
Would it? I don't know. I think they would.
Yeah, that's my thought. Is that maybe they kind of instinctively, naturally.
Yeah, I think they do, because obviously it
come
starts with bony, don't they? When he's a kid, they're bones.
Yeah, but they'd still be physically in here because of the length of the.
I don't know how.
If only we were on camera, because we could explain how the claws work. They don't grow, do they? They're covered in metal. Anyway, so they're stored in his forearms, we assume. There's nowhere else for them. And so he pins one guy to the wall, and the bar owner comes up behind him with a shotgun and says, get out of my bar, you freak. And then he uses his other hand to cut the shotgun in half and then walks out disgruntled. It's interesting that this is the protagonist of the series overall being introduced this far in. Because it's quite a way into the film.
Yes.
And he's quite a popular character. And I know other shows and cartoons to follow. Like there was one cartoon that was called Wolverine and the X-Men. They took second billing to Wolverine. So he's not actually the antagonist, but he's so popular. He got his own film series. 3 films eventually? We're going to look at more.
I think it's 3 films.
Yeah. One of them we probably deleted from our minds. Not long after Wolverine hops into his motorhome and heads off. Stopping along the way after hearing movement and finding Marie in the back.
Which to me is weird because he's going through snow, so how would he hear that movement? Oh, okay.
He's got heightened senses.
So
he is an animal sort of man. After a few moments, he agrees reluctantly to give her a ride by stopping down the road and make her run up to him. He's like, I don't give a damn what happens to you, sort of. But it's all a front, really. And we finally meet Logan and Marie, or Wolverine and Rogue.
Oh.
So we can call them the names that we're more used to calling them now. Mid-conversation, suddenly a tree falls in front of the trailer, and Wolverine is injected through the windscreen. And she just happens to be talking about wearing a seatbelt. Yeah. As it happens. What's the chances of that happening?
Before she's like going out of his home.
Yeah. He's slagging it off. Oh, I thought I lived bad. You literally are sleeping rough. He's got a literal motor home, and you think you can complain. Anyway. The motorhome catches fire with her stuck inside as a big hairy man leaps out of the trees and attacks for no reason, apparently. I mean, he has a reason, we know in the end, but just out of the blue. Then suddenly, as things look bad for Wolverine and Rogue, a man with laser eyes and a woman with white hair arrive to save the day from nowhere, taking a prone Wolverine and Rogue, less prone, to safety before the motorhome explodes. Quite a dramatic sort of little explosion. So, how do you feel about our introduction to Wolverine and X-Man number 1 and X-Man number 2, as they're not named yet?
Quite good. So,
that bar scene.
I feel like Storm would. I feel like Storm would make me sunnier there, though. if she come along. But
Sorry.
Oh.
All the noises are happening here. I'll cut these out.
I kind of feel like, yeah, these, I don't know, a bit underwhelming.
It's quiet.
Yeah.
Because you don't really know what's going on. This man
No.
just comes out of nowhere. A tree falls down.
And his man doesn't even talk, does he? He just attacks.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going, it's like,
Yeah. And it's interesting. You can see what the purpose of that scene is. Like, you need to wear a seatbelt. Immediately crashes. She gets to see, while sat in the passenger seat through the windscreen, where he smashed through, him stand up directly in front of her, and the healing happen. And then that feeds into an event later on in the film. But, like, as a casual observer, you can't really read the language of film to see that this is the intent, and it could be a bit smoother. And then, how did they know what was going on? The X-Men. What the hell? Where the hell did they come from?
so you were told him.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. If they know, if they can't track Magneto, why can't they just track the people who are working with him all
I
the
was
time?
thinking that. Yeah. I was watching.
The whole time.
I was watching. I was like,
There's a lot of, when you know the future and the films that go back in time a bit, there are flaws in the storytelling. One we'll come to later. One helmet-based thing that's really important too. Again, we'll come to that later. Next scene. Somewhere, sometime, we cut to a yellow-skinned man spraying paint, possibly, onto something. A big hairy man walks in and gets made fun of, but gives a animal growl in response. Before Eric asks Hair Man what happened. After a small chat, we see the older man look at a stolen dog tag marked Wolverine, and he holds it such a way that you can see the Auschwitz tattoo on his wrist, the concentration camp tattoo on his wrist, and you see him look at the dog tags, and the camera is implying he's also looking at that and then looking at the tattoo, associating both of these things with each other as versions of the same sort of atrocity, you know. And then the pair leave. Him out upset with his failure to capture the person they were supposed to be capturing. We cut to a new location in a sort of lab, medical space. Miss Grey from earlier tends to a still unconscious Wolverine, which is interesting. He's been knocked out for a while by the looks of it. Suddenly he awakes and he attacks in confusion. As he's running through this space, a voice in his head leads him around like he's watched The Predator too many times. Turn around.
come in here.
Over here. It even has a music sting, like the music in the background is almost like The Predator as well, slightly. Professor X is a dick, is what I've written here. He's just like, oh, come over here. It's getting him to run around the place. Logan walks into a room eventually with a small group of teens. One named Kitty, and 3 others of note. There's like 4 other kids in there. One seems to be maybe of mixed heritage or Native American heritage. She's got a necklace on. I can't pinpoint who that character's supposed to be. But she's obviously meant to be a key character. The one is played by his actor for the rest of the films as well. The others will be recast several times. Charles explains he's teaching physics and offers breakfast physics. Tells Logan he's in Winchester, New York, the state, not the city. He still has no clue of time or day, but we know from the offer of breakfast it's probably the morning.
Yeah.
He may be just referencing the fact he's woken up. I don't know. Charles introduces Aurora Monroe, who walks in the room, and Scott Summers, Storm and Cyclops. Then Dr. Jean Grey, codename redacted. He explains who Magneto is And Wolverine asks, "What's a Magneto?" Well, I'm more than glad to do a quick Google for you, Logan. A Magneto is a self-contained generator of high voltage that produces ignition to an engine through spark plugs. A magnet, hence Magneto, spins in close proximity to a coil of wire. The magnet spins, or the magnet rotor is turned. It generates a strong magnetic force that's held back by a primary coil. So there you go.
Magneto.
That's the first thing I found about it. He explains that the man who attacked Wolverine was Sabretooth, which tells us very little. Xavier shows Logan the school. A boy with fire powers, John, and the other boy who was in the school was Bobby. So that's Iceman and Pyro. And the tour, this section of the film, is very much like a little publicity video for like kids. Join the Xavier School.
Come to
like
our
all the different
school.
shots they take, and then every so often they cut to a new scene, but it's a few seconds later, and it's like Wolverine. Let me help you find out the history about yourself. And it's like different angles. And I love it. It's terrible. In time, Charles explains he met Eric Lensher, or Magneto, at the age of 17. So we'll put a pin in that for future reference. Because, we see them meet, right, in the future.
Yeah.
So we'll decide whether or not he was telling the truth. Or the film was paying attention to itself in the series. So a discussion about Wolverine and all this. How do you find the school? Finally, we're at the school.
That's how I was like the cartoon, in a way.
I remember the cartoon didn't have any kids at the school. It's the underground stuff.
Whereas this one's more like a school for the gifted. Which is weird, I don't know why that school is exempt though. Because I feel like Senator Kelly would be outside that school protesting.
I think the problem with the school is that they don't explain what they mean. So it's not that sort of gifted. It's a secret. It's a school for people who are gifted, not gifted. Historically. And obviously it's just property that he owns, family-wise. So, yeah. And that building is interesting. It will come up again, I think, later. I think after this, the mansion is played by a different building. But this isn't... I don't think this is the first time this building has played the mansion. Yeah. And I'll explain why later. That's a big surprise thing. We'll put pins in certain things. Next scene, limo, escorted by two police on motorbikes, drives under a plane, and a crowd of protesters, supporters cheer and hold placards. One banner reads "Human Rights," which feels very all lives matter in today's climate. Another just simply reads, "Send the mutants to the moon forever." I'm not sure if this is intended as a reference to the comics, but Magneto famously has Asteroid M, and the Inhumans have a city on the moon, which you may know if you've seen the Inhumans TV series that nobody saw.
Yep.
We're going to end up seeing that at some point, I'm sure. Well, at least I will. For this bloody show. Kelly gets out, waves, says a few things, hops in a chopper, and he tells his aide, eventually, after a little discussion, it's a war. Before his aide turns into a blue woman and he's kicked to sleep. Yeah. Back at the X-Mansion, this is where it starts going back and forth, back and forth. Back at the X-Mansion school, Wolverine is a bit sexist at Jean before he's given a scan. That's a little running theme that we notice here. Wolverine and the slightly sexist writing towards...
I feel like if that was nowadays, people have like an issue with that.
He's not overly offensive about it, but it just feels a bit cringy.
I find it
more cringy than it was intended to be.
I was like, oh. But I guess because I know that eventually they do hook up.
Do they?
I think they do. Well, in a cartoon they did for a while.
Do they?
Yeah.
Because I think at some point he ends up with Storm a couple of times.
Does he?
And there's sort of a romance triangle between him, Scott, and Jean historically. But I don't think he's ever officially, properly sown any sort of seed, if so to speak, to be crude. So I'm not sure about that one. Again, we're going to have to stick with films.
Yeah.
It's still a bit dated, if I'm honest.
But who wants to date Cyclops? Is lame.
Cyclops is not as bad as you think he is.
He's worse.
This Cyclops is interesting because it appears as though in future he's a different Cyclops because his power set's different. He shoots lasers from his eyes here, and for those who don't know or don't realise, Cyclops, it doesn't shoot lasers from his eyes. He shoots concussive blasts, which the best way to think about it is a punch. So like a physical force pounding into something, coming out of his eyes. So it's like a beam, but it's like you could even make it so that it was invisible.
It's not going to burn you. It's just going to push you.
It's going to break things in front instead of setting things on fire. But you could make it so like to visualize it, they've coloured it in as a beam of light, but it would be. You could get away with it being invisible and it knocking things over still in front of him. Like what he looks at gets blown up.
So it won't look as cool.
Or punched with his eyes.
Yeah.
If you want to break it down, he's punching things with his eyes, which is more ridiculous, I suppose. But yes, so in this film, he's explained as having lasers from his eyes at one point, I think. I may be misremembering. But in the first film, when he comes back and it's the past, I think that's Days of Future Past.
Yes.
He is hitting things with his beams. So he destroys the tree and he destroys the toilet cubicle he's in, things like that. Yeah. And maybe, again, I may be misremembering. Maybe it's Apocalypse or something. I don't know, one of them. Anyway. So Wolverine's given a scan and we're introduced to Wolverine's adamantium bones. It's stated that his bones have been bonded with adamantium or like plated essentially with adamantium. And we find out that he heals, and so he could be very old. Like even older than you, Professor. Not knowing how old Professor Xavier is in this film does not give us a good starting point for what that could mean. But to these people, he must be quite old. So a quick note, adamantium. While adamantium, an alloy specifically, noted in the comics and the film series, doesn't exist as the hardest metal in the world. Neither does vibranium, obviously, which is even more magical somehow. It's interesting, vibranium is obviously a placeholder for adamantium in the Marvel cinematic universe, but also vibranium is a thing in the Marvel comics, which confuses everything. Adamantium, being an alloy, is made of two different components, kind of merged together, like some other metals are. While it doesn't exist, the hardest metal in the world, tungsten, which is what this ring I'm wearing is made of, does exist. Of all metals in pure form, tungsten has the highest melting point of 3,422 degrees centigrade or 6,192 degrees Fahrenheit. The lowest vapor pressure at temperatures above 1,650 degrees centigrade or 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the highest tensile strength. Although carbon remains solid at higher temperatures than tungsten, carbon sublimes at atmospheric pressure instead of melting, so it has no melting point. Tungsten has the lowest coefficient of thermal expansion of any pure metal. Like when something gets hot, it expands. Alloying small quantities of tungsten with steel greatly increases its toughness. So if somebody was to make claws for somebody in the real world, they may choose to make or involve tungsten to some extent. The problem with a harder substance is often it can be more likely to break because it's less resistant. It has to be flexible to take damage. Anyway, so there you go. That's the closest metal I could think of that would work. This is quite a heavy. I don't know if you've ever held this ring. It's got a little bit of weight to it, hasn't it? Heavier than you would think it is.
Tungsten.
Yeah. Anyway, back with Magneto. Kelly is tied to a chair in a cold room. You can see steam coming out of his mouth. Yellow Skin Man uses his long tongue to catch and eat a pigeon whole, alive. The pigeon squawks like a crow for some reason when it dies. Don't know if pigeons do sound like that. Or dove, maybe. It may be a dove. Essentially the same thing, I know. Magneto informs Kelly his aide, Henry Gyrick, has been dead for a while. But Magneto's had Mystique keep him company. Magneto drops the Brotherhood of Mutants name. This is referencing the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from the comics. Maybe they said evil. There's a weird cut there. But it seems a bit too comic booky to keep the evil in there. But they could have used it in the way where he was mocking the notion of them being evil. Yeah. Like, oh, we're the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, you know. But who knows? Brotherhood of Mutants works fine. Somehow Magneto, I mean, he sees himself as innocent, doesn't he? So, yeah. So even though he's murdered someone. Somehow Magneto invented a machine to turn people into mutants. We don't know what his prowess is with inventions, Toad or Sabretooth. Sabretooth doesn't seem like the super smart person. I can't imagine Mystique is quite smart, but again, I don't know if she'd be an inventor. But he has a machine that turns people into mutants using his DNA exclusively, possibly. How he did this or how it works is not really explained.
No.
But for some reason, he has to be in the machine. Back at school, Jean shows Wolverine his room, and he again makes a pass at her. She lets him know she's with Scott, and then she attempts to read his mind. There's a later confrontation between Scott and Jean, and, you know, he says, if she was my girl, I wouldn't need to, you know, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And then he says, oh, stay away from her. She's my girl. Anyway.
Any part of this scene, did Wolverine have those memories in his head, or did she unlock those memories?
A bit from A, a bit from B, right. I think. I think you see the consequences later, though, don't you? So, a little note here. You notice that when she's reading his mind, they're almost the same height.
I know, aren't they?
And then she walks past Scott, and they're almost the same height. So, here's a note about their heights. Hugh Jackman is 6'2" in real life.
He's quite short.
Wolverine is 5'3" in the comics. He's supposed to be tiddly.
Yeah, because he's meant to be like a little tank.
Yeah.
Like low center of gravity. Like.
Yeah. Cyclops in the comics is 6'3", but actor James Marsden is 5'10".
I mean, it's still a difference between Wolverine and Cyclops, technically. Like,
yeah.
It's the next to each other.
Yeah, if he's gonna, I mean, in real life, Hugh Jackman is much taller than, by a few inches, James Marsden. In comic books, James Marsden is Cyclops is much taller than Wolverine. Yeah. Frank Jessen is 5'11" and a half, but Jean Grey is 5'6".
What's that?
But here they're almost all practically the same size, except in the few moments where Wolverine stands next to Cyclops, and Cyclops is taller suddenly because they had him stand on a box. They did not think to have him stand on a box all the time when other people walk past, but still. It doesn't matter in the end, because eventually Wolverine grows taller and taller until he's actually the size of Hugh Jackman in the film series. They just ignore it, which is why people called for one of the names down for Wolverine was Bob Hoskins. Yeah, that gives you an idea. Some people have joked they wanted to see Danny DeVito play Wolverine.
That would be funny though, Danny DeVito.
But there is a more appropriate character for Danny DeVito because there's a Canadian superhero character who was in Alpha Flight, which is the first superhero team Wolverine was part of, called Puck, who's even shorter. He's like 4 foot something. He's like practically a square.
Danny DeVito always threw Penguin on it.
Yeah, all right, sure. Don't take the penguin away from you. All right. So take away from that what you will. I just thought it was worth mentioning. That night, Rogue sneaks in on Wolverine sleeping. I don't know what she's trying to do.
Me neither. I think it was just to set up the next scene. I think
She just wanted to see somebody she knew and felt uncomfortable, maybe. Anyway, he's startled as a result of his dreams and Jean's messing with his memories. So he's having dreams and then they're infecting his memories are affecting his dreams. And he's jolted awake suddenly and just instinctively sticks his fist out with his claws out. And he accidentally stabs her more or less through the chest on the right side, so not through the heart, but still nasty.
Yeah, she would have died if she didn't.
Thankfully, in a moment of clarity, she remembers him being knocked out of the cab of his motorhome and healing, and therefore she steals his powers and heals herself, and then runs off, all embarrassed and confused. Later, after he wakes up, Xavier explains Rogue's powers to Logan. The second time we get explained to us that this explanation of her powers and seeing her powers being used is like Chekhov's gun. It's going to be a key point later. It's going to be ham up. Back at wherever we are, we find Senator Kelly locked up and looking out of the bars of his cell window. He finds himself suddenly able to squeeze through them. We should mention Magneto did his experiment earlier on him, but it was so non-event that we don't really pay attention to it. It is important though. But yeah, a big weird bubble went over him, and then nothing seemed to happen. But later on, he's in his cell, and he's all stretchy and squishy now for some reason. So he squeezes through the bar of his window and escapes, or tries to escape. Magneto then strides over to his cell to visit him to find him gone. He then leads out the window and welcomes him to the family, as he's now got mutant abilities, or he's now technically a mutant. During Sabretooth's attempt to bring him indoors, he grabs him by the wrist and he stretches and slips out and falls into the sea, potentially to his death. Discussion.
This scene to me was a bit weird though, because how did Magneto outside just hanging out down?
Yeah, he just jumped to a conclusion. Where else did he have to go? That interesting effect where he walks into the cell and the bars kind of
I like that.
That's practical. That's not CG or swap over bits. I think it's like some rubberized sort of bars. But that's an interesting little effect on that. And Sabretooth still just kind of there.
To me, Sabretooth just feels dumb in this. They've just made him a dumb, like...
Monster Man.
Yeah.
He barely has any lines. Not anything really of value.
Oh, he's just quite...
Yeah. But Magneto's lost Senator Kelly and he's like, I'm angry about this. But again, this is just set up for what's going to happen next. Yeah. So, and we've seen the two key points. We've seen Rogue demonstrate her powers again on Wolverine, and Magneto testing the machine and then the results of the machine. So that's the sort of key points for what's happened here. At the beach, a little prick is stabbing a jellyfish with a stick as his sister pleads with him to let it go. Kelly steps into the beach, having survived the fall. Many people looking on in shock as he turns from a semi-jelly man with gills into normal him. His mutation isn't super clear, but it's almost like he just kind of adapted to the situation he found himself in instinctively. I don't know. Back at the school, Bobby chats to Rogue. convincing her to leave as the other kids are freaked, I think he says. He says that he thinks she should leave, but oh no, she goes away and it's Mystique all along.
You see this part? Why didn't Professor Xavier detect her?
Maybe he chooses not to use his powers.
Maybe.
Out of respect for all the students there. You know, he'd have to be constantly searching.
Maybe.
And you can imagine that being quite exhausting after a while. I don't know. Maybe he has to control not hearing everybody's voices all the time and turn it off, you know. But then again, why would he need Cerebro if he's so powerful? It's all kind of in the air with his power base. Under the mansion, Xavier and Scott wonder why Magneto wants Wolverine, with Professor saying, I'm not sure entirely that it's him he wants. When Logan walks in and asks where she's gone. So they figure out Rogue has vanished off the mansion grounds, and they decide to use Cerebro to find her. We find our first look at how Cerebro works, and this sort of visual effect of it stretching and expanding out. It was a nice little effect, but they loved it so much they kept using it for every single film. So it becomes a bit seen after a while, and becomes key to the second film. But we'll get to that later. So he finds out where she is, and he explains in the midst of doing this that Magneto helped design Cerebro. Or no, key word he helped build Cerebro. Slightly different.
That explains how he built that machine then, because he has got some...
Maybe he's literally just the construction worker.
Maybe wrong.
Because he uses his powers. Like you see him later in the second film, he's in Cerebro, or a version of Cerebro. He doesn't really do anything. He just kind of moves some panels around. Anyway, we're not talking about the second film just yet. So he uses Cerebro and finds out where she is, and tells them that she's gone to the train station. And so Storm and Cyclops attempt to leave ahead of Logan and stop Rogue, but somehow, even though they left ahead of him, Wolverine ends up ahead of them and steals Cyclops' bike without any keys.
I was thinking actually. I was like, how did he?
Did he dig through the floor? Or what?
Maybe the keys is on the side. Maybe.
I don't know. How did he get there? Even then, he'd have to run in front of them. There's only one lift.
You don't even know the mansion that well, does he either?
No. I'm not sure how any of this. Did he sniff it out? Did they get confused? That's something we're going to talk about later. Actually, somebody getting confused. Also, it's some sort of super bike.
Yeah.
Like, there's a little button that just means it goes turbo fast. This is one of the most embarrassing scenes. Just him riding the bike high speed with the camera shut too fast and his like stupid face as he's riding the bike. Like, sorry Hugh, but it just looked really ridiculous. Don't have a go at me. Anyway, Wolverine gets to the train station and meets Rogue on the train. How he knows which train it is, I don't know, but he finds her quite... I mean, again, he's got good sniffs. So, probably found her out. We see two Bobbies back at the X-Mansion.
Oh.
The second Bobby is walking out of the turbo lift, or lift, because I've been watching too much Star Trek, and he's on the ground floor as the other Bobby passes. So he's coming out of the lift on the ground floor. Right? Putting in that for 5 seconds. Cyclops and Storm arrive and begin searching the train station. Back to Bobby. He's now downstairs in the X-Mansion, turning into Charles and breaking into Cerebro. Did he step out of the lift, realise he was in the wrong place, go, oh, silly me, turn around, get back in the lift and then go back down again?
Probably.
Or did they just accidentally film it out of order and put the scenes in the wrong place?
Probably filmed it out of order.
Yeah. Put them in the wrong place. Yeah. Because that doesn't make sense when you think about it. It's a very small nitpick, but, you know. Mystique enters Cerebro and attaches a sort of blackish liquid vial to it and then leaves. This place's security is shit. It's not even just that Professor X can't track her, it's that nobody kind of notices this second version of Bobby or woman who changes into other people. You'd think there'd be some sort of tracking security to notice this was going on.
But no,
they're useless. Like, why hasn't Magneto sent Mystique over there as a random mutant before? He just mess with them.
Yeah.
Maybe once a week he does. Just moves their
Mystique going there quickly.
Open the lids of the milk bottles and leaves them on the side. You know, just throws their magazines away when they haven't finished reading them. That sort of thing. Just out of laughs. Anyway, back on the train, Wolverine spends some time comforting Rogue, and suggests that she should go back to the mansion, and she explains that she still feels the people she's touched in her head. He comforts her properly. At the station, Sabretooth attacks Storm. He has one of his only lines, which is "Scream for me."
No, you say you owe me a scream.
Hmm?
I think he says something like you owe me a scream.
No, he says that later.
Is it later?
Yeah, he says that later. But this is where he says the scream thing. And it smacks her against the ticket booth. As Cyclops attempts to help her, Toad, on the ceiling, whips his visor off with his tongue, causing blasts to explode unchecked out of his eyes, blowing a hole in the station's roof.
You think Cyclops would have a better visor, wouldn't you?
Or shut his eyes.
Yeah, shut his eyes. But I was saying that someone can't just grab your visor off you that easily.
Yeah, his visor gets more ridiculous in the future in the comics, because he ends up with this visor that's like a whole headset thing, which is in the shape of an X. So he shoots X's and stuff. It's really ugly, but whatever. People like it. People like Cyclops.
I don't.
You don't like Cyclops. Storm strikes Sabretooth with lightning. Meanwhile, Magneto attacks the train. Laughing at the notion he's there for Logan before abducting Rogue. Outside, he attacks the police before Xavier takes over Sabretooth and Toad with his mind to try and stop him. And you get one of the more interesting scenes where he's, having this conversation with somebody who can't see through them, and they're holding him as hostage, or he's holding her as hostage, and then he starts holding the police as hostage with their own guns. It's an interesting scene, and
this is one of my favourite scenes out of the whole movie.
It's probably the strongest in the whole movie. It's less action. It's these two men discussing again their moral differences and what he feels is the extremes that need to be gone to do what's necessary to change things. And it's interesting. I would watch a film with more of that in it, because a lot of this, like Super Motorcycle, it's a bit goofy. Especially with Toad and Sabretooth. You can see why they aside from the fact Jennifer Lawrence plays her later, you can see why the writers and producers kind of lumped onto the Mystique sort of character as a sort of more interesting key point, because of what her power base is interesting as well. The moral history is a bit dark as well. She's not just a gurning supervillain. Anyway, she arrives in a helicopter, and the bad guys jump into the helicopter and fly away. Xavier failing completely to stop anything from happening. Again, we like you say, that was probably the strongest scene, right? And the reveal that he's after Rogue.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the beginning, why we saw Rogue's narrative at the beginning of the story. What do you think so far?
So far, it's so good. Wow.
Do you want to digress a bit?
I just feel like nothing happens in this film, really. It's just a setup for the future film.
What will happen? Yeah. Or even the ending. The ending. There is a relatively big sort of stake, but it's not too much.
No. It's just a setup for the future films.
Yes, especially the end. I wonder how far ahead they knew they were going to make a second film.
probably not because the ending is we get onto it. But the ending is a bit loose, isn't it? Because it could either go one or two ways. Like you could see that being the end, and it ends there. Like because Magneto's is locked away. So that could have been.
Yes. No. Yeah. You can see that as a relative end.
Yeah.
But the whole him, we'll talk about it properly in a minute. But him sending another character off to find out the truth, and it's interesting. Anyway, back in the film, Sabretooth attacks a guard at Ellis Island, as another guard has been attacked and is for some reason disguised Mystique, even though she could just not waved at the other guy because Sabretooth was that. Anyway, they're attacking Ellis Island and taking it over. For those who don't know, that's where the Statue of Liberty is.
I've been there as well.
Oh, how was that?
Uneventful, really. It's nothing. It's not like it looks more exciting than it actually is.
Yeah. The no funfair or anything like that.
No.
Magneto talks to Rogue and mentions seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time in 1949, just a few years after the war.
Oh.
So it kind of places a time for him where he was in America for the first time. After she asks, he lets her know that he will be killing her.
He's like, I'm going to kill you.
Are you going to kill me? Is that yes?
I like his honesty though.
Yeah. There was an element of he feels bad about it to an extent, but then he's called out on it later because he's still a coward about it. His plan is flawed, but not because his machine kills normal people, but because his machine is as likely to kill him if he is in it as Rogue's touch could kill him if he uses her instead. Yeah. So she's going to have to take enough power from him that it could kill him. So why not just get in the machine? Because anyway, also, doesn't he have a mutant there with regenerative powers? Does it have to be one with magnetic powers? No. Like, why not put Sabretooth in it? Assuming he has the same power set as Wolverine. So based on his history in the comics, he does. But
or make the machine to be used Wolverine instead.
Yeah, they could have used Wolverine and used his magnetic powers.
You can literally lock him into the machine.
Does it have to be Magneto? It's like it's mutant based, isn't it? I don't understand what the rules are for this machine. Anyway, Scott explains that he's at Liberty Island and his plans using a space map. This weird 3D map. This is the most future technology you see in the whole film. A map, like the same map turns up in Black Panther later. It's all that weird hologram, sort of bouncy, sort of sand map thing. God knows where they got that from. Wolverine suits up eventually and agrees to go with them, and they leave after making fun of the classic X-Men's comics outfits. Looking back at this film post-Avengers, it seems a bit ironic because you can have that sort of outfit and still have it feel realistic. And
because you don't have it as bright. You just make it a bit more.
It could be bright even. Captain America's outfit is pretty accurate. Yeah. But they just wanted to be like, oh, we're serious.
I do like the old unit. I don't know.
The uniforms don't look bad generally in the film.
No.
And I appreciate the costume design in some of the characters in the comics. Some you can understand they're being a bit dated or a bit odd. But generally, Storm's outfit is still quite close to the comics, ironically, because of that weird cape thing she's got going on.
It's just not the same.
It just doesn't look as good. The X-Men fly to the island, making a water landing. In the visitor centre, the X-Men fight to save Rogue. They walk in and encounter all the other, bad guy mutants, or Toad and Mystique specifically. Wolverine fights Mystique as she looks like Wolverine, with one notable bit where he cuts off her claws.
Wouldn't that hurt her though? I don't know.
It does hurt. She does scream out.
Yeah, but silly.
Depends what part of her it's supposed to be cut off.
She's got regenerated powers.
She does with the with the changing ability, but then he stabs her in the chest later.
Actually, no, stomach, is it? Yeah.
Stomach, chest, something like
stomach.
and that doesn't heal.
Yeah, because she changes into a police officer. And you can see that wound mark still there.
So it's how it all works. I don't know. Maybe because there are appendages that aren't normally there. Like it's like growing hair.
And she can't use them until they are quite
sort
sharp.
Of claws. Or maybe they are. Yeah, I mean, hair and bone are the same thing essentially. So maybe it's just like how it works for her. She can grow bone versions of that look like metal. I don't know. It's very confusing. But he cuts off her claws and she reacts with pain, but then nothing really comes of that bit. He beats her eventually after tricking her by convincing her dressed as Storm that he doesn't recognise, but he does. And then Storm at the same time gives the favourite line.
You know what happens to Toad when they get hit by lightning? The same thing as everything else. Which I was like, when I was a kid, I used to love that line. But as an adult, I'm like, this is cheesy as hell.
It doesn't make sense either.
I know, that's what I mean. As a kid, I'm like, that's a really cool line. And you're like, oh. Because in my head, it's like, I think it was something else in my head. No, in my head, I thought she said, have you ever been struck?
I mean, it's not on the level of motherfuckers always got to be skating up a hill.
In my head, I always thought she said, have you ever seen a toad get hit by lightning? But it's not. So.
Even that doesn't make much sense. Have you ever seen a toad get hit by lightning?
Yeah, but this is. But it's cooler than ever.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, here we go. So he gets struck by lightning and is flung into the ocean, and presumed dead because we never see him again.
No, we don't know.
Which is a shame because Toad in the comics at one point becomes the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and is smarter than you give credit for. But also, I'm glad that he's not in the film anymore. On Liberty's head, Magneto eventually traps the rest of the mutants pretty easily as we watch the summit begin. They try to convince Magneto of the flaw of his plan, and they fail pretty badly. Eventually, Wolverine frees himself by stabbing himself with his claws. Although, how that works with his metal bones holding him in place, I don't know, because he's still magnetized. So he just stabs himself. If Magneto's powers are still working, he should just still be stuck there.
No, but he's got
bleeding.
No, but he didn't have his claws out, did he? His claws went out. He just put his claws, so he sticks.
Yeah, but he's stuck like that because he's got bones made of metal, covered in metal. So it doesn't matter if his claws are in or out. He's still stuck like that.
Yeah, Magneto hooks him, does it, with a little.
It's really confusing. Anyway, so maybe Magneto's forgotten and he's walked away. And yeah, like you say, he got something that frees him. It's not super clear.
And plus, how would he cut through his own adamantium?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like the bones would get in the way.
What, for TV, let's...
Suspension of disbelief is what we'll go with here. Eventually, Magneto gets into a fight with Sabretooth on top of the Statue of Liberty's head. One of the, an interesting little fight spot, but, it sticks out in this film historically, but it's not a massive fight.
I always find it weird when he does that claw thing around the...
Yeah, around the point of how does that work physics-wise? You should just slip off. Yeah, we'll ignore that. It's a fun little fight scene.
It looks cool enough.
Yeah. And that bit where he almost kills the two inside the head because he's not really paying attention to where they might be. Scott Sabretooth eventually blasts out of the head before Storm and Jean lift Wolverine to the device to save Rogue using the combination of their powers. This is interesting because it's one of the few times where these people teaming up, working in conjunction with each other, makes sense in an X-Men film. In the future, it's just, let's all shoot the bad guy at the same time. But it's like she's using her wind powers to lift him, and then Jean Grey's using her mind to steady him while she's going up. Like, that doesn't happen often in these films. Even the Marvel films, that happens less often than you think. So that's an interesting sort of creative choice. Eventually, Scott takes a shot with his blasters, and you think, oh, he's going to shoot the machine, but he shoots Magneto instead. which means he's a good leader because he makes good decisions.
That's what you keep saying to yourself.
And once free, Wolverine, free of Magneto's powers, breaks the machine before giving Rogue a ton of his mutant healing powers so she can survive. But simultaneously, she takes so many that all of his old wounds start splitting open.
Oh, that was nice. I was like,
Yeah, it's really sort of clunky CGI, but the concept's gnarly. Yeah. And the day is saved. Magneto's knocked out. So, what do you think of this final big action conclusion?
It was okay, but it's a bit underwhelming. I don't know.
It's a small scale sort of.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's a nice little see them all team up.
Mm.
Because the only time we do it, that's the only time they actually redo it in a movie, don't they? Really? Because the rest of the time we see them fight individually. Really.
Even in the future film, like the next one, I don't remember any sort of real.
No.
It's an interesting little moment having them work together. Although it's cool seeing like the battle inside the visitors center between the handful of characters. Jean Grey seems like a bit of a third wheel generally, because it doesn't take much for Toad to stop her.
No.
Although you could imagine her maybe, even if he's covered her mouth with the gunk, like she focused for a second, she could probably knock him out with her mind. But
she's not fully powered yet, is she? Though.
No, well, yeah. We don't want to start talking about her getting fully powered just yet.
Yeah, but I feel like in this one she's like just beginning, because obviously she talks about how Xavier's teaching her to use her powers, so she's sort of like at the beginning of her journey. This one.
Yeah, it feels like she's been there for a long time at the same time. So it's interesting. But we, again, historically, we know what they do, if you've seen these films, with her journey a couple of times. So we won't go too much into it, but it's not what it could have been. But yeah, I think that's an alright little package action sort of scene.
And for the 2000s as well. Just got to remember that as well. Like
for a small budget, this is the first time. I think
because we've seen so many like grander stuff now.
Well, even then though, you have Spider-Man about the same time, and that even though it's just him against one bad guy, it's like there's a slightly bigger scale, like saving people, the people on the bridge teaming up to fight against the Green Goblin, and then him saving the kids on the bus. I think it's been a while since I've seen that film. And then there's the last fight is in the burning building and all this stuff. That's like, it feels like there's more going on. But maybe there was a slightly better budget. We should look at the budgets.
I want Sony ones, Fox's.
Well, yeah, Fox. Anyway, we get back to our finale. Police arrive and take a wounded, disguised Mystique away. And Magneto gets taken into custody. At the mansion, Xavier wakes from his event in Cerebro.
His slumber.
And a healed Wolverine wakes a little later after that. Xavier tells Wolverine about a location in the Alkali Lake, Canadian Rockies. Senator Kelly appears on television, but it's Mystique in disguise.
That's right.
The TV news has no clear markings, doesn't give away any dates or times at all. I still can't give you a day for when this happens. So we have no timeline except for the past, which isn't great. But hopefully with the second X-Men film, we'll have a bit of idea of when all this takes place. We end with Magneto playing chess with Charles in a plastic prison suspended over a pit. It's really nice. He reminds Charles, war is coming. And we get credits. And there's no post-credit sequence, because this is the past.
You see, I don't like post-credit credits anymore.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
I don't mind the ones at like 5 minutes after one of the credits, but when it's like you got to sit to the very last.
You know what I mean? You don't have to. I think when done sparingly, they could be fun.
Yeah.
But doing them every time. But then Marvel started doing them in a way that made fun of people for sticking around. so they had a laugh with it. Like Spider-Man, that's a Sony film, I know, but it's the Spider-Man one specifically. And there's a couple others that don't have them. So it's not necessary to have them. Right, a quick mention. Post-release, X-Men wise, with the mention of Bryan Singer earlier, it's a second, more recent elephant in the room we should talk about quickly. I told you there was one more little thing. It's not as big, but it's still not nice. Ray Park, or Darth Maul as is partly known. He'd been recently talked about possibly coming back to play Darth Maul in the TV series, The Mandalorian, possibly. Oh. But that was all rumours. And obviously he exists in some of the other Star Wars films as a character. And TV series. A couple of months ago, the actor started trending on Twitter as he seemingly deliberately posted a video of himself and his wife / former partner, I'm not 100% on this, on Instagram, where she can be seen performing sexual acts on him. This was apparently a version of revenge porn on his part to make her look bad. He even went on to share her phone number publicly.
Wow.
And accused her of certain things and slagged her off in public and said some questionable stuff. So there's a bit of a cloud hanging over Ray Park at the moment. I was never a massive fan.
I don't see any of this stuff really.
No.
I guess because I don't really look for. I don't know.
Again, this isn't so big compared to the other stuff we've discussed. But it was important to mention as he's leaving the series at this point, and we can't pretend these things didn't happen. I'll leave a link to that story as well in the notes for the show. So yes, we finished X-Men. What do you think overall?
I enjoyed it. I still think it's enjoyable to watch X-Men.
Yeah, it's light.
Yeah, it's light.
There's less of a.
I remember it being more grand in my head because I've not watched this film for maybe
it feels so short as well now.
I've not watched this film for like 10 years. So obviously rewatching it again, I was like, actually, it's not as grand enough when it was, but
it's aged pretty badly, but it's not a terrible.
It's not aged that badly though. Not compared to somewhat like
some of the cheesy elements, like the Brotherhood of Mutants, Sabretooth and Toad, are awful. Generally, the bad guys are all kind of, aside from Magneto, look weird compared to the good guys. Good guys look normal, sort of thing going on. That's sort of corrected in the second film, but so that I don't know about how I feel about that. It's cliche to an extent when it comes to visual coding, and some of the cheesy shit like Wolverine riding that fucking motorcycle. That's so bad. It's just like you just cringe.
You feel like
really bad.
You feel like it's cut out.
Yeah,
cut.
Tweaked a bit. He stole a car and got there ahead of them.
Oh, and he stole a motorbike. That's fine.
Yeah, he stole a motorbike. You could have the scene with him leaving ahead of them, them going, "Oh, you have to get this stuff." Would explain why he's ahead of them, and then they like, "Where's the motorbike?"
Yeah.
What? And then you see it cuts immediately to him arriving at the train station, just parking it.
Yeah.
That's funny on its own because it shows he's stolen the motorbike, but it doesn't make him look ridiculous. But I don't know. How much was different in your version? 1.5. You said you.
I didn't watch 1.5. I must have watched this one, but there's nothing.
Nothing standing out.
No.
Interesting. Maybe we should take a peek at it, not go into it as an episode, but there are going to be a couple of films we have to watch twice at some point. Specifically, Days of Future Past, because there's 2 cuts to that film.
Is it?
Yes. There's Days of Future Past, and there's the Rogue cut.
Oh.
Because Rogue was completely cut out of that film, but she's in the film.
Oh.
So we'll have to investigate to see the 2 differences of that film. So, yes, it's an interesting film to go back to, and obviously it's important in the canon of comic films, So I suppose you want to know what we're going to do for the next episode. And you're probably going to assume we're going to watch X-Men 2 or X2. And I'm here to say that we're not going to be watching X2 or any of the X-Men movies in the series of mainline X-Men films. Because we have to take a pit stop.
What's that picture go
to? So there is a film that was released before X-Men. And it's based on the Generation X comic book series. It's simply called Generation X.
I think I've seen this film, you know.
You probably have. It was originally a pilot, but released as on DVD and tape. Maybe just on tape, actually.
I think I've seen this film.
And it was, like I say, set as an X-Men Generation X sort of pilot for a TV show. But they never picked it up. They just released it as a film.
Oh.
Straight to DVD. Straight to tape. And one of the interesting facts is the mansion in the Generation X film is actually one of the mansions used for the mainline series. So technically, we could consider it a sort of canon. So the events of that film will be looked at next episode.
Oh.
Yeah. It's our one major skew sort of diversion from the X-Men series. There will be a couple others. They're more obvious and reasonable. Like, I don't want to spoil too much, but Deadpool is technically...
Never seen those films,
You never seen that? Well, we're going to see them now. Deadpool and like the Road Cut, like I mentioned a minute ago, that's going to be our other proper skew from the X-Men universe. Because I don't know how canon that's considered.
Are we going to delve into New Mutants eventually?
And New Mutants will be the last.
Yeah, because that's not officially out yet. It is, but it's not like.
We have yet to see the most recent Phoenix.
I've seen that. Me and you.
So that one's we're gonna have to plan around it.
Bro.
But yes, so the next episode will be Generation X, and then the episode after that will be X2. For those who want to watch or listen to X2 ahead of it. So there is a version of Generation X available on YouTube, if I can get it linked to you. And I'll put the link in the show notes as well.
So I'm correctly that it was X-Men 1, 2, and was it 3? Then
Last Stand.
Last Stand was the Last Stand.
Then it was X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, that's the one, because they sort of, after Last Stand, they sort of picked up that storyline in.
And then it was... I'd like to say it was the First Class film, but I think it was the next Wolverine film, maybe.
Yeah.
No, it was definitely First Class. Then it was The Wolverine. Then it's...
Because at some point they kind of split off, didn't they? Because Wolverine's separate to...
No.
Is it not?
No.
Is it all part?
The end of The Wolverine, and then it's X-Men Days of Future Past. And that's the point people nod to as a split in the universe. After that, it's, Apocalypse over here,
yeah.
Logan over here, Deadpool there, in his own universe. And I think... and New Mutants is another fourth, like tied but not tied. But I think also Gen X is going to be over here somewhere. Like they'll all be classed as one timeline, but with the time travel stuff, it's going to get confusing. So that should be interesting. So I hope you're prepared. I will link you to the necessary video files.
So I look forward to Last Stand actually.
Should be interesting.
I like Last Stand. Even though
I picked up a copy of it on Blu-ray. The only films we will be watching that aren't on Blu-ray are the first two, from my point of view, the first two and Generation X.
I don't remember the second one at all.
Interesting.
I remember that. I
seem to remember that having a 2.5 or something as well.
I remember Last Stand because I've watched that a lot.
It looks really good on Blu-ray. Like I remember.
Yeah, I
think it's one of the first Blu-rays I ever watched.
It's hated by a lot of people though. But we'll get to, I guess, when we get.
I don't hate it, but it's the fact that they start getting a bit memey with Juggernaut.
Oh.
Because I'm Juggernaut, bitch. That's from a YouTube edit of one of the cartoons
Oh, yeah, I'm the Juggernaut.
where Juggernaut would say that in the cartoon, but it's not really what he would say.
Yeah.
So, you know, it gets all a bit memey. So I can appreciate why people don't like it. Also, Kelsey Grammer is the best and worst casting for Beast. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what's coming up next. Anything you want to say before you go, Linbert? Thank people for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Yes, we will. If you want to listen or watch along, feel free to go and in the notes there'll be a link to it. But try and find a copy of Generation X. And watch that along with us. And we should be back within a month.
Yes.
Hopefully. I want to be a bit closer between episodes than last time. But thank you for joining us and
until next time.
continue mutating.
Continue.